So I'm going to give everyone a little bit of time to get in here as I do my announcements. As always, guys, thank you all for your support. It really does help build the channel. Make sure you guys hit the like, the follow, and subscribe buttons. It really does help build the channel. Ring the notification bell so you guys know when I go live, which is usually about every Sunday at 1 p.m. And I am branching out on other media sites, guys, so you might be able to check me out on one of your favorites. That being said, let's get into today's topic. We're going to talk about it a little bit, then we're going to get underneath the car and remove a part. That part contains 2 gaskets. We're going to look at those gaskets and then figure out what the best course of action is going to be for those gasket replacements. Switch my chat up so I can catch all you guys' chats. So there we go. Now I've got those. If you guys got any questions throughout this process, chat them in down below. If you guys have a project that you're working on and you're kind of stalled or stumbling on something, feel free to leave your questions here, and either myself or one of my mods will help answer your question. So some of my mods are mechanics, people that have history in the industry and have been around. So don't feel bad about asking them the questions. As we're talking about the exhaust issues, as exhaust gets older and the heat cycles that it goes through, you will notice that you have certain things that are difficult to take apart or break. What we're looking at is a part that I had recently fixed, but the gaskets went bad. So in order to fix this, we're going to go ahead and pull that piece back out. We're going to clean the flanges and then put new gaskets on it with a gasket sealer. Now, it takes a special gasket sealer. You can't just use anything you want out of the box. That doesn't work. So you have to have the right gasket material in order for it to seal. Let me grab it because I really want you guys to know what this is if you guys are going to work on your own exhaust projects and you guys are going to use a sealer. We should cover this before we get underneath. And because I am going to go live on a different program that I cannot mention here, it's the Mean Green is the one I'm trying to branch out on. I'm going to be taking it out here. I'm going to be reinstalling it over there. So this, yes, it might be backwards for you guys, but this is the exhaust sealer. You use this only for exhaust because it's designed for high temp. Over 700 some degrees without burning off. And what this is going to do is put a sealant barrier between my 2 flanges, even though I'm putting a gasket in there. Sometimes the gaskets are too thin and they easily blow out. Other times the sealant will actually seal tight and keep it from having issues. Now, if you're going to use this copper, ultra copper, which is the exhaust one, it does say 24 hours to cure. So if you're going to do this in your driveway or in your garage, just know that when you take it apart and you put this on there, you won't be able to start your car for 24 hours. The reason for that is this stuff has to cure. Now, sometimes with heat, this stuff does cure faster. That's another trick, is sometimes it will cure quicker when you put a little heat to it. I don't suggest putting a blowtorch to it to try to heat it up and get it to dry faster. You'll actually cause it to break down and probably not work like it's supposed to. The best is to put it together, leave your car sit. That's going to be the best approach to this setup. What are we looking at as far as those gaskets that we have to replace? Well, we've got 2 gaskets. And the gaskets are made of a little different material. So our first gasket is a smaller one, and this one doesn't have the silver on it that you're about to see on this one here. But this one is more, it's not a paper gasket, but it is designed for high temp. So it is a good gasket to have. This one is the large gasket on the back side right before it goes into the catalytic converter. This has a bite to it, so when this one gets compressed down tight, what it does is it bites into the metal and causes it to seal better. Now, mine, for some reason, separated. Either I had cheap gaskets or something was wrong with the gasket. So what we're going to do is take that piece out, grind all the flanges nice and clean, and then we can reinstall. Here's one tool that you guys should get your hands on if you're going to attempt this project. And this tool does make a big difference. And unfortunately, I'm not going to be able to use mine because I don't have the bit. Let me switch the camera around for you guys. So it's this one, not this. It's this one right here. This works really great for cleaning up flanges, but you don't want to use a grinding disc and put grind marks into that flange. It will cause an exhaust leak. So you want to use a sandpaper disc like this. If you can't use this setup, an alternative to that setup is this. You will use one of these wheels that are designed for removing rust and flaky scale, and then put it onto a drill. So I use a hammer drill because I grind really hard. And hammer drills tend to work better for me, especially since I do a lot of drilling. If I ever have to drill out a bolt, I want that hammer drill because I can put a lot of pressure to it without doing damage to the drill. If you have just a standard drill, it works great for doing small projects, wood, things like that. But when you're on heavy, thicker metal and you're really trying to push into it, to grind into it, you want a hammer drill, something that has a lot lower torque, but you can put more pressure to it without putting damage on the motor. So that's why I have that hammer drill as my tool in my garage. Again, guys, I see you're starting to float in. If you got any questions, chat them in down below. We'll read them on screen or help you answer your questions with your parts or problems with your vehicles. My mods do come in and they do check things, so I do appreciate their help and support. Before we get underneath this vehicle, let's cover some of the safety things that you need to be aware of if you're going to attempt crawling underneath a vehicle. Obviously, you're going to need jack stands. You're going to need a jack. You're going to need to make sure that those are positioned safely. You are going to need to lift the vehicle. Now, mine is lifted at quite a weird angle because I'm choosing to just slide in on the passenger side to access where that is. And it's actually closer to reach it on the passenger side than it is the driver. So that was my reasoning for doing that. Also, underneath there, we're removing a flex pipe. So this flex pipe might give us some problems and it might be a kind of a hassle to wiggle this thing out. When we get to that point that all the bolts are out and we're going to attempt to wiggle this out, we're going to use either pry bars or we're going to use flat screwdrivers to kind of wiggle it and get it to move down. Now, remember that when we're doing this process, whatever you do to take it out, you're going to have to reduplicate that to put it back in. And you can't scratch the pipe. If you scratch it, you're going to create an exhaust leak. So the main trick with this is to make sure that the flanges are clean, make sure we don't scratch anything because that does hinder us putting the gaskets on and everything sealing up properly. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to get you guys set up underneath and we're going to start taking this out. It's going to take me about a minute or so to get you guys kind of flopped around here. In that time, if you guys got any questions, chat them in or any comments. I'll try to read them on screen. But let me get you flipped around and let's get underneath this thing. Some behind the scenes things. Guys, we're going to need this particular tool. And I only need this because I'm filming for you guys. But I need this to be able to get underneath the vehicle. So you guys are going to notice I'm going to move you guys around a little bit here. So I'll try to keep the camera steady so it doesn't jostle you guys so much. There we go. All right, so let's get underneath this thing. We'll take a look at what we got. It's pretty simple where it's at, and it's really easy to access. This is not a difficult thing to get to. All right, so I got the pipe right there in shot for you guys so you can see it. What we're going to be using is 1/2-inch wrenches and 14mm wrenches. I will show you guys that as I take the bolts out. So our first one that we're going to take out. Now I break most of these loose because I do live in the rust belt, so I want to make sure that I can get these apart. But this is the first bolt right here. And it's got some washers and a lock nut on it so it doesn't come apart. I always put my bolt with my washers back on it in one piece. That makes it easier so I don't lose any washers in this process. So this slides off really easy. This tells me that we won't have a problem trying to put the new gasket on. Next, I'm going to go for these front ones, these front bolts here. So again, I've gotten these loose already, but apparently I don't have that one loose enough. So I'm going to grab my 14s because my front bolts are a little bigger on this car. For some reason, they use a 14 millimeter bolt on the front ones. Okay, so this one has a nut on the back side, but there's also threads on the front pipe. So to make my life easier, I'm just going to remove the nut right away so it doesn't get in the way. And I'll just set these down. And then I will take my 14 and actually kind of break these loose a little bit. Okay. So now unthread these, set these down to the side. Okay. So next we can go ahead and take this off. I'm going to lift it up, forward, and then back. I'm already noticing a problem with this gasket. I'm going to show you why the gasket failed here in just a bit, guys. This is something really important. And the front doesn't even feel like it has a gasket on it. Okay, so at some point we're going to crawl underneath here. We are going to try to wire wheel clean these up the best we can. We want these flanges clean when we're doing gaskets on them so that we don't have any leaks and we don't have any air gaps. And the flanges really do need to be super clean. I'm going to slide out here and bring you guys out. We're going to look at this flex pipe. Just want to say thank you guys for tuning in. Oh, we do have a chat. JR, what car are you working on? This is a 2004 or 2012 Malibu LT. So that's the car we're working on. And the car sometimes does matter, but sometimes it doesn't. Vehicles will have similar parts to this. New system or just gaskets? This is going to be just gaskets. This part was replaced a few months ago, and judging by this gasket, somebody did not put the new gaskets that I gave them on this vehicle when I brought it. So this gasket is extremely deteriorated and it's completely shot. And I'm going to guess that this one here is going to be in roughly the same shape. Yeah, this one is, it's not in the best of shape. It's already starting to deteriorate and it's not sealing up properly. We do have to clean these flanges really well. So we're going to set up and we're going to clean some of these flanges quick. You want something done right, do it yourself, JR. That is truer words never spoken. I brought it to a guy because I don't have a welder in my shop. It's a tool that I'm looking at getting here in the future, but I just don't have it yet. And while I did that, I decided, well, why don't I just send it over to this guy? He normally does really good work, so I gave it to him. And now this is what I find is that the gaskets have been reused, even though I gave him new gaskets. This is really bad practice. You should never reuse gaskets, especially on exhaust, because of the heat cycles. They just deteriorate the gaskets really rapidly. So I'm going to go ahead and switch over to my drill setup because this will work better for me. Thank you guys for tuning in on the Sunday. Normally I do my podcasts every Sunday at 1 p.m. And I try to go every Sunday. There has been times where I've had some family stuff going on or I happen to not be around to do a video. I do try to let you guys know when that does happen. But for the most part, I try to make sure I'm always here for you guys. YouTube's where I started. I've been here for many, many years, and it's kind of where I want to stay. Hard to find honest mechanics nowadays. JR, you're true. You're absolutely correct. That's why I started this channel. I noticed that the dealers started getting even more shady. I noticed that mechanics were going along with whatever the dealers were saying, and I couldn't live with myself anymore. And I'm like, no, this has got to stop. I'm going to tell you guys the truth and not hide anything. And you guys will know about that when I start talking about the news stuff, usually at the end of my videos. So always stay tuned till the end so you guys check the news. I'm just setting up now with all of my stuff. I have to get my cords ready. So some of you might ask, again, why am I using a hammer drill as my drill of choice? And it's because when I do have to get rusty bolts or broken bolts out, I use the hammer drill because I can put a lot more pressure and torque on it. So right now, I'm going to get a block of wood. These gaskets are toast. And anyone who knows anything about these gaskets already knows that this one has been in for a very, very long time. Horrible gasket design, but this is why you have to put new gaskets on. All right. JR, keep it up, man. Yeah, I'm trying to make sure I do the best that I can with all of my projects to show you guys as much as I can. So now that we have this out, what we're going to do is we're going to go after this and clean up this flange. We're going to use our hammer drill with our bit. Now this one is designed not to cut. Don't put a cutting bit and start cutting on here. If you nick this, it won't seal up. So you want this flange clean, and this is going to be the best way to do this without nicking it. Should get something softer to kneel on than the concrete, but okay, so here's our flange. I don't have to get it perfectly clean, but I do want to get a little bit more of this flake off. I want this to seal up nice and tight. I don't want this to have any leaks. So I will grind at this a little bit longer here and see if I can get that cleaned up a little bit better. Okay, so this flange looks really good, nice and shiny, all clean. This is what we want all of ours to look like when we're done. So I'm going to transition over here to the bench for you guys, and we'll discuss some of the stuff going on here that we have. So when we took this out, we realized somebody reused gaskets. Huge no-no, never do that. It's something I'm going to talk to the mechanic that I decided to hire to do this job. I will be talking with him. Hold on. Make sure. There. I do want to make sure that he knows that these gaskets failed, and I really do need to find out if he reused these gaskets. If he did, this is not a good practice. When you guys are looking for mechanics, make sure you guys ask the right questions and don't be afraid to double check the work that you had done. This is going to be something we'll talk about here at the very end when I start getting into the news section, guys. I really want to cover what you can do to look for those good mechanics. Check the chats quick. Okay, we're looking good. So, like I said, we're not going to be putting this back in the car in this video. This video has been having a lot of transfers going on, guys, so I'm sorry about the transfers aren't as smooth. I am going to work on a gimbal device that allows me to move it a lot smoother for you guys in the future, but for now I use the tripods that I have that I've used for a few years. When I knew I was going to do work like this, I would just set it up on a certain setup and I would leave it that way and just try to work with it even though it wasn't comfortable at all. I'm getting older. I can't do that as much. I just got to be honest with myself that I can't really position myself in a weird position for an hour while I try to do a repair for you guys. What we seen here was just the basics of taking out the bolts, pulling down that mid pipe or flex pipe, and then taking the gasket material off and making sure we clean the flanges really well. Now we do have to clean the flanges under the vehicle. That one I might do off camera, but you want all your front flanges to look like the one I just showed you guys. All of them need to look that way. Once you have that done, what you'll do is you'll take each gasket, you'll put a little bit of that silicone around the opening of the gasket on the front and the back. You'll seal those gaskets to your mid pipe. Then you'll put your mid pipe up in and set it down. You'll put your bolts in, and once the bolts are in, you run them tight. Make sure they're tight. It will heat cycle, so you might have an issue with bolts coming loose. If you notice this, and let's say you guys do this work and you do the repair, and then it comes loose on you guys in the future, then you'll know, okay, hey, I have to put a locking bolt on it. What does that locking bolt or locking nut look like? You want the metal locking, not a nylon, because it's on exhaust. So if you use a nylon heated nut, lock nut, what'll happen is the heat will melt the nylon right out of it, and it's no longer a locking nut. It's just a normal nut. So you'll have to do the metal locking, and those have the weird tabs on the nut. And it's an actual lock nut. So as it goes down, it almost feels like you're cross-threading it as you go down. But as long as you start it cleanly, it won't wreck the bolt when you're going down. Those don't come loose. So once you tighten them up, they'll stay tight. They don't back off. If I do this repair and I notice that it's backing off and that it's leaking in the future, I'm going to go ahead and take everything back apart again and do it again. Only this time I'm going to use all locking hardware. And I'll probably try to use a spring clamp style. The spring clamp works great because as you compress that spring, it keeps pressure on it. So no matter how many heat cycles you do, it'll adjust with the heat cycles. So that's a really nice thing to have on exhaust, but do know that when those break, oftentimes you do get exhaust leaks really rapidly because there's nothing keeping the pressure there anymore. John Michael Azonia. Awesome detailed advice. Thank you. That's what this channel is about. I'm here to give you guys the best advice I can, rely on my mods to help you guys answer your questions. And I try to keep this simple enough that you guys can do this in your own garage. That's really why I'm here. I could be doing this on the side and making money and not recording it, and I would probably be money ahead, but I'm not giving back. And that was the whole reason why I started my channel 4 years ago. Almost 5 now. Actually, I think it is 5. I started 5 years ago to give people knowledge, share my knowledge that I got from 2 people that were very influential in my life that got me into the automotive field. It's more important to give my knowledge than it is for me to just try to turn a quick buck. And I always hated how that's become the big thing now. Alex, yo, from Arizona. Hey, Alex, I'm very familiar with Arizona. I used to have family in Arizona. So at one point, maybe I'll like to move back there at some point. I really don't like where I'm at now, where in the Rust Belt, I have to deal with cold and snow and ice. And I don't care for that. So at some point, there might be a move in the future. Butch the Cat. Does Lightning McQueen's car has an insurance or life insurance? That's a good question. So let's get into that. Let's have some fun with some of these topics, shall we? If we're going to look at it, if they're calling the cars sentient beings, it would have to have life insurance, wouldn't it not? Just kind of my take on it. So that's a good fun one to drop in there. I do enjoy those. That's awesome. So let's get into how to spot shady dealerships, guys. I've done videos on this. I'll always bring these topics up whenever it comes up in a chat or comments about these. I will flat out tell you guys, do your homework on your shops. Make sure you look into every source possible to find out if they're a good shop. Don't only check the reviews on their website, check reviews from outside websites that other people post to. Make sure you do the homework on the dealership. Find out what their rating is. See where they're at. Find out if anyone's done pressurized sales. Any place that does this is shady. They don't do things honestly. And we're going to start seeing some of this, guys, out of the Ford camp. With the Fords having the biggest issues that I've seen in many, many years, they called for 775,000 vehicles to be stopped driven immediately. This means there's going to be some dealer scam stuff going on. They're going to get you in to do that repair. They're then going to tell you that you can't get the repair done because they don't have the parts. Then they're going to turn around and try to sell you a new car. This is how the scam works. And I don't want to say that the recall is a scam, because that recall is a really bad one. That recall, if the airbags go off, it sends metal shrapnel throughout the interior of the car. So this is a huge, huge problem. And how did this happen? Some of their parts in their airbags deteriorate over time. And as those parts deteriorated, it allowed other parts to move inside the airbag that were not supposed to move. That means these airbags could go off without you even knowing it or without even hitting anything. They could just go off. This is why we have to watch for this shady dealership stuff. When we see it, we got to call it out and tell everyone we possibly can. You got to be proactive on it, because what'll happen is all it takes is one little mistake and they're going to jump on you. And once they do, you're going to be stuck in a car payment for the next 7 to 8 years. And honestly, guys, I hate car payments. I really do, because I'm throwing money away in interest when I could straight up flat out own out the vehicle outright. And that means more to me than trying to make a payment on something that might look nice, but it's going to fall apart later on. So let me cover some vehicles quick with you guys. You guys already know the vehicles on the channel, but we're going to do a quick rundown. Our 04 Toyota Tacoma, this is the Silver Swine. This one's kind of the showpiece of the channel. I do a lot of custom stuff to it. We've done spray and bed liner on it, undercoating. All of the stuff that makes this thing awesome has been a work in progress over the last couple of years. When I first got it, I got it from a family member in Arizona when they had passed away. I brought the vehicle back to where I live, and I proceeded to go through this thing top to bottom. That means replacing timing chain, water pump, alternator, doing a whole bunch of mechanical work, plugs, wires, coils, the whole 9 yards, doing an intake setup on it. We went through and did all of the exterior. We did chrome bumpers, chrome grill. The reason I went chrome is so that I can clean the bugs off easier. It's a personal choice. It came with painted, and painted's nice, but painted gets scratched, and silver is a horrible color to try to color match. Pablo, what car do you have right now? I have a few cars. That's why we're covering this. So the one that's my winter driver is an '01 GMC Jimmy. You guys have seen that here on the channel. It's a nice winter vehicle, awesome four-wheel drive, gets me through the winter, awesome. We do have some projects coming up on it. I have some upper A-arms I have to replace. We've gone through and done some timing and stuff like that. Pablo, I see your comment. Give me a little bit longer. I want to get through all the vehicles and then I'll get to you. But that one's a really great winter vehicle. It works awesome. The four-wheel drive is spectacular. I've done a ton of work on that thing. I've gone through and done a bunch of motor work and everything like that. We will break all that down when that one comes out of storage late this fall before winter. I do need to do an oil change to it and get it ready to go for winter, so that will happen. And then let's move on to our next one. Our next one is a 2012 Malibu LT. This has got the 2.4 liter in it. I'm getting roughly 30 miles to the gallon with this car. And for these cars, that's pretty good. A lot of people are only averaging about 27 on this. So I've done enough work to get these vehicles up to good enough quality that I'm getting great fuel mileage out of this one. If you ask me fuel mileage on the GMC or the GMC or the Toyota, I'm going to tell you that fuel mileage is not good. It's about 16, and when I drive almost an hour to work and back, I need something that's better on fuel. Last vehicle that we got on the channel is a 2020 Kia Soul EX. Again, you guys have seen videos on this. We've done some stuff to it. I do have more coming up. I need to get the headlight that I'm missing here so I can do my headlight video for you guys. That way we can get all LEDs in the front and in the back. We've done a lot of LED work on that car, getting it straightened out. We are going through some motor issues with Kia, so guys, stay tuned. I will be talking about some of these motor issues with Kia, especially the piston ring problem. We are on the verge of dealing with a piston ring problem on that particular Kia. We are having to go through their warranty process and all of that. That will be in a separate video coming up in the future. So, Pablo, to answer your question, what is my favorite? I gotta say, I have favorites for different things. This is why I'm not brand loyal when I work on cars. I'll work on pretty much anything. But currently, the Toyota is my favorite to drive and just go out cruising with. I like the feel of a truck. I always have. If I want to do a longer drive where I want to feel more comfortable, then my favorite is the Malibu. It really is. It's become kind of my go-to car because it feels comfortable. You know, the ride is smooth. I can drive a long time in it without feeling fatigued. If I'm going to go anywhere off-road or anything that I need more ground clearance or I need to be able to haul something with a small trailer, then it's the GMC Sierra. I would say the least favorite of all of my vehicles is going to be the Kia Soul. And honestly, it's not really my vehicle. It's the wife's vehicle, so she gets to drive that. And she really enjoys it. I don't knock that. If that's what she wants to drive, good. But for me, it either comes down to cruising this thing or long tripping this one. That's really where my favorites are. So I hope that answers your question. Jake, how hard is it to replace gas tank straps on a 90 Chevy truck yourself? Okay, so if you're gonna go for replacing the gas tank straps, make sure you check the frame first. If the frame is in good shape, then you can safely go ahead and pull those straps down and put new straps in. The one thing I'm going to advise you is get as much fuel out of the tank as you can. meaning that if the vehicle still runs, try to drive it or let it idle until the fuel gets down to where it's not as heavy in the tank. You don't want to be doing this with a full fuel tank. Now you can, and if you're only replacing the straps, it won't be so bad because you can just unbolt the strap or cut the strap if the bolts are rusted in. Cut that strap, pull it out of the way, pull the bolt out, put the new strap in, and then move to the back. But make sure that you have a couple of jacks on that fuel tank so it doesn't shift or move when you do it. That'll be your best way of doing just the fuel tank straps. Now, if you have to do a fuel pump also, again, make sure the tank is empty or siphon the fuel out of it before you go ahead and try to let this tank down. But if you're just doing straps, secure it with 2 jacks so it doesn't move or shift or jostle. And don't jack where the fuel pump is. You'll see it on the tank where that pump could be. If nothing else, reach up on the top and feel where that pump is. Don't put the jack right below that fuel pump because you could crush the fuel pump. Go to the left or the right of it. Sometimes people will go onto the front of the tank when they're going to pull and change that strap. Other people will put it on the back. Some of them will go on the ends and they'll jack up that tank. That is the best way to just do straps. All right, Bill, good to see you, Bill. One of my mods are in chat. Glad to see you're doing well. Thank you, man. I'm back to normal. I'm all healed up. Life is good. We're getting back into projects. We're doing a bunch of stuff. So thank you, Bill, for checking in. I do appreciate that. All right, so we got Michael. Thanks for what you do from Garland, Texas. Texas is a nice place. I wish I had the resources to be able to move to Texas, but it's not in the cards right now. Maybe in the future. Like I said, I do want to get out of the snow and the cold. I'm sick of it, and as soon as it is reasonably feasible for me to do so, that's kind of one of the plans I've been working on. Butcher the Cat, what are your thoughts on BMW E36? Okay, so some of the foreign stuff, I'm not a huge caught up on kind of guy when it comes to that stuff. I can only tell you really basic issues that I've seen with BMWs. A lot of times it comes around maintenance. If you don't do maintenance properly, and this is on Volkswagens, BMWs, any of those pretty much German engineered cars. If you don't do your maintenance on those, they fall apart really quickly, and when they do break, they're extremely expensive. Audi is horrible. They've got a timing belt in there, and if you don't replace it at recommended intervals, you could break the belt and destroy the motor. I've seen a lot of Audi cars where they don't do the timing belts break, and the motors are junk. So the best thing I can do is, for the vehicles that you're looking at, if you're looking at a particular style of vehicle, make sure you do your homework and look into the maintenance records. Find out exactly what maintenance you have to do when. That way, when you're going and looking for that car, you know the questions to ask. Prime example is if you're looking at, let's just say, an Audi Quattro A4, and you know you're looking in that kind of mid to late 2000 model, they're going to need a timing belt. And if there's never been a timing belt done on it, I probably wouldn't buy that car. I'd stay away. And I know BMW has some of those similar issues. So on that, that's kind of my thoughts. If you do your maintenance, I do think they make a good vehicle, but they do require some extensive maintenance. They are a little bit more expensive to repair because of the brand on them. You could probably, a good example of this, you look at Lexus and Toyota, both technically owned by the same company, but which one is cheaper to work on? That's right, the Toyota. The Toyota is by far cheaper to work on. Now, I'm not saying that Toyotas are cheaper in general. They're not. They're actually more expensive than most of your GM vehicles. But it is a lot cheaper than trying to work on a Lexus because of the Lexus brand. That's why. Jake. Well, from the frame on his truck is near perfect, but the straps is okay. So if he's using a ratchet strap to hold it into place, yes, I would probably go buy some new tank straps. You can buy those anywhere. Now, with metal tank straps, and it's a plastic tank, you do need to put some kind of insulator between those straps and the tank. It will rub through eventually, causing the fuel tank to go bad. If it's a plastic tank and you don't put some kind of shielded protection on it, such as don't use Kevlar. Kevlar is a bad thing because Kevlar can be aggressive. It's fibers, so that fibers can break and wear through the tank. You do want to put a thicker rubber insulator in there. Now, some people will use a bicycle tire. I don't recommend that because some bicycle tires do have cords in it, usually around the edge of the bicycle tire. But put in a thicker strip of rubber up against that tank and that strap so that it needs to go in between those two. If you do that, then your repair will be successful, but you do need to do those processes. Make sure you find the right stuff to put in there. We've got Vacor. What about a radiator smoking? Any diagnostics that can help me figure it out on my own? And it's smoking underneath. Okay, so first thoughts that come to my mind is you have a radiator that has a leak in it somewhere. So as long as you see that smoke, one thing you want to smell is that sweet smell. So if you smell a very sweet smell, that's a sign of a bad radiator. There's a leak somewhere and you got to chase that down. Once you chase that leak down, you'll have a better idea on what you need to do to fix it. It could be a leaky hose or it could be the radiator itself. Also look for any puddles. See if there's any puddles underneath the vehicle if it sits after running. After everything's cooled down, just see if there's a small puddle underneath the vehicle. That'll help guide you in the right direction. You know, is it back underneath the motor? Is it more towards the front by where the radiator is? But I would say if you're seeing any smoke coming up underneath the radiator, chances are you're starting to have issues where the cores in the radiator could be failing, or those plastic tanks on the side of the radiator have a small crack in it. But somewhere that is getting out and you're seeing that come up. SoCal, you got a leak. You got a leak in the radiator, smoking. Yeah, so that's basically what I'm saying is you're going to have a leak somewhere where that coolant is coming out. The coolant is superheated. It's really hot. So once it comes out and it hits the atmosphere air, you see that smoke. That's exactly what that is. SoCal, thank you for that comment. Thomas, just compressor replaced on a 2015 Corolla LE. $1,000 labor parts. Garland again. Yeah. So again, guys, when you're starting to do some of this stuff on your own, you notice how much money you can save, and you really start understanding how these parts and pieces all fit together. If you're dealing with air conditioning, it gets to be a little tricky sometimes, though, because you do have to evacuate the system. Should do it safely and responsibly, but you do need to evacuate the system, change out the parts you need, and then you need some specialty tools to pull the vacuum back on the system. It has to be pulled down in order to put the Freon in. It won't work well if there's air in the system and then you put the Freon in, because what happens is that air takes up the space of where that Freon needs to be. So yeah. Let's talk a little bit about the shops. So shop prices have gotten ridiculous because the dealerships are pushing for a lot of these repairs. I know my mechanic people that watch get kind of frustrated when I start harping on this. It isn't the mechanic's fault. The mechanics need to make a wage. Their school is not getting any more expensive. Tools are definitely not expensive or not getting any cheaper. And because these things are rising in cost, it's adding more to the problem than what it's actually solving. So now your typical mechanic needs to make a lot more money in order to actually function and do well. And honestly, for the amount of time and effort and energy and physical labor that they have to put in to fix a lot of these vehicles, because let's be honest, a lot of these are not engineered to be worked on after a certain point. The vehicles become disposable, and that's been my other gripe in the industry, is they're now all disposable and nobody really cares about what's going on in the industry. And that's where I'm trying to draw that hard line and say, let's hold on to what we got, fix what we got, preserve what we got and let the newer technology stuff fade away into existence. The only reason I say this, a lot of this stuff, it's getting to the point that an average person will not be able to work on it. Average brakes are starting to become where you need a specialty scan tool to be able to put the vehicle into brake repair mode in order to even change your brakes. And this is extremely ridiculous. We should never have to do this. People should be able to fix their own brakes if they have the knowledge. It shouldn't be that we need a bunch of these specialty tools to do this. Thomas. I just read Thomas. Vancouver. Thanks. No problem. I really hope that helps. Hope that helped get you kind of figured out there. SoCal. Check radiator fluid. Fill if it's low. Drive a few miles. Warm it up. Park. Check for leaks. All really solid advice. That is awesome. SoCal, when I get a chance, I will be giving you a wrench. You are dropping some truth bombs here that I need to have you as a mod on the channel. So I will be doing that. I'll try to get to it this week and get you modded up. On the same 90 Chevy, it rides rougher than a K3500, even though it's a K15. Do you have any ideas of what would be, or what you could do to make it smoother? So Jake, here's some of the issue with riding rougher. A lot of people do suspension changes and do a bunch of stuff to their vehicle. Oftentimes when you feel something riding rough, that could be an indication that there's something wrong with the vehicle, especially if it's only a half ton and it's riding like a 1 ton. There's a very good chance you have some suspension issues going on that you need to dial it in and figure out, do you have bad ball joints? Do you have a bad upper control arm that it's locking into place and not bouncing like it should? Suspension components need to move. So if it's getting to the point where they're so stiff that they don't move, it's going to feel extremely rough. Upper control arms are usually a good indication that there's something going on there. Another area that you could have issues is lower control arms. If it's in the back, I would suggest checking for 2 things. Number 1, did somebody put blocks in the rear and add leaf springs? If they added leaf springs, it's going to ride rough. The only reason that people would do that is if they're pulling a trailer. The other thing is if they have load leveling shocks. My GMC, my GMC Jimmy has load leveling shocks in it. The reason why is I wanted the vehicle to have more ground clearance. So I used the load leveling shocks to push it up. That way I could get it up higher, and then I turned my torsion keys up. On the vehicle you have, more than likely you have torsion keys. If those torsion keys are maxed out, meaning that the bolts are ran all the way in, it's going to ride extremely rough. What you'll need to do is slowly back those bolts out and make sure you back them out evenly. You want those bolts to be at the same height. You don't want one side higher than the other. I've seen this happen so many times on GM Chevy pickups, is the torsion keys are not set right. They have them set like this when they should really be like this. And what this does is keeps your suspension level and even. As you turn one side up more than the other, it's going to be stronger on one side or the other. And it doesn't feel right when it's running. I always try to adjust that. SoCal, suspension needs to be checked on that Chevy. Yes, you are correct. And is that K15 lifted? Yes. Those are 2 other good points. If it's lifted, you are going to have a rougher suspension. There's nothing you can do about that. He just chatted in no. So that tells me you have some suspension issues going on if it's that rough. That's not something normal. It shouldn't ride like a 1 ton. If you're feeling that 1 ton hit, that tells me there's bigger issues going on, and it doesn't hurt to look into it deeper and find out, do you have a bad ball joint? A good way to check that is make sure that there's grease in it. Make sure that the boots are sealed on all your joints. Tie rod ends won't matter as much because that doesn't really affect the suspension stiffness. But you want to look for those rubber boots. If boots are gone or tore, grease is coming out and not staying in, you could potentially have one of those bad. And if those are bad, what will happen is your A-arm and your spindle will almost become locked into place. So every time you hit a bump, the only suspension you have is out here on your A-arm because this is locked to your spindle. This is not moving unless it's moving here, which puts a lot of stress on that A-arm. So I hope that kind of gave you some indications of things to look for. SoCal, how many miles on it? The whole front end is new. The rear is decent shape and was replaced from a junkyard. Did you check the rear suspension? That's going to be my next thing. If you check the rear suspension, and you do have a lot of miles on that, there should be quite a bit of suspension work done on it at that point. There should be a ton of suspension work done. Most of your front end components, your upper control arms, lower control arms, if it's got torsion keys like I was talking about, a lot of that stuff does need to be replaced, and long before the 275,000 miles. So if that hasn't been done, that would definitely need to be done. But yeah, I would definitely say take a look in the rear. If it really does, like when you're sitting in there and you're riding in the vehicle, does it feel like it's hitting you in the spine? Or does it feel like it's hitting like in your knees and in your hands? Because if it's in your knees and hands, then it's coming from the front end. If it's coming from your spine, then it's coming from the back of the vehicle. That's one way that we always tell on test drives how to tell where the problem is. Junkyard parts are very easy. Junkyard parts very easy could be junk. High miles. Yeah, SoCal, you're right. Some of his stuff is at the point that a lot of those suspension components are going to need to be redone top to bottom. Butch, just got my engine rebuilt. What should I be worried about or taking care of it? Okay, so you just rebuilt the engine. You're just putting miles on it. Let's get into a little bit of engine breakdown. When you buy a new vehicle, usually you go through a break-in period, meaning that you're going to run the vehicle usually about 3,000 miles. You don't want to run it on a... Okay. The biggest thing to do when you're doing prolonged things that are going to help a motor last longer, when they put oil into that vehicle from the factory, there's additives put in that oil to make sure that it holds together during the break-in period. That break-in period is super important, but also you need to flush that oil out and get any metal contaminants that were in the engine that got absorbed by the oil out of the engine so it doesn't do any damage to the engine. Once you've ran it, I only run, I will even go 1,500 miles on my very first oil change and drop it. Get the oil out, get it cleaned out, put the fresh oil in it. I'll run it for another 15, do that oil change again, because what that does is it gets all the engine contaminants out of it. That is super important. So that's going to be a big break-in process for you. Keep an eye on your coolant and your temp. Make sure your temps don't start creeping up. That's a good thing to do. You don't want to cook brand new head gaskets. You don't want to cook a brand new engine. So make sure that it's not getting warm when you run it. The break-in period is more of try to be nicer to the vehicle. Don't stomp on it like people tell you. Break-ins are different for every purpose. If you're building it for a track, you're going to slowly ease into the RPMs, but you're going to work to build it up to the RPM range that it's going to run at, and then you're going to hold it there for a little bit. The point of that is to break it in how it's going to be used. If it's a daily driver, you don't want to do that. You don't want to push those RPMs up because you're pushing a stock engine too hard. So you just want to let it naturally break in, vary your RPM so that the piston rings will seat properly. And in the first, I would say 7,000 miles, you're going to do a few oil changes just to keep any contaminants out of that engine as possible. That will really help you in the grand scheme of things as far as break-in and longevity of that engine. One other thing I would do is don't be afraid to pull your spark plugs at about 5,000 miles. See what they look like. Make sure that everything's burning properly in the cylinder and that you don't have any issues. Your spark plugs give you a direct indication of what's going on inside your cylinder. Do you have any leaks going into the cylinder? Is it burning oil? Is it burning coolant? You can see that all on spark plugs. So if you know how to read spark plugs, those are usually your best way of reading an engine and knowing what's wrong with it. Let's get caught up on some chats here. You guys are flowing really good with the chats today. This is awesome. Matt, what kind of cars do you have? I just covered that. I have the Malibu 2012. I have an '04 Toyota Tacoma. I have an '01 GMC Jimmy, and we have a 2020 Kia Soul EX. Jake, the truck pulled parts off of the junkyard was 70K miles. So the rear, if you pulled the rear axle only and you didn't change out the springs, then you're sitting really good as far as the rear axle. What I would be concerned with is if they pulled the springs with it and you put the springs and the axles in, maybe you got 1-ton springs by accident. Count the number of leaf springs you have. That will give you an indication of what you're looking at. SoCal, oil. After rebuild, change the oil every couple hundred miles. I wouldn't go every couple hundred, but I definitely would do it every 1,000 for a little bit. Slowly get yourself up to that normal oil change interval. Let's cover normal interval oil changes. Guys, don't listen to your vehicles. Your vehicles will deceive you. Don't push oil past 5,000 miles. I don't care if you're running synthetic or not. Don't do it. The reason why is engines don't necessarily break down synthetic oil, but what happens is they do catch all the contamination and dirt in the engine. The longer you let that engine oil run in your vehicle, the higher chance you're going to have damage to the engine because it's going to circulate that stuff. Yes, your filter will catch some of it, but I've seen very fine micro particles that some of the newer style filters do a horrible job taking those out, and they will actually get back up into the engine and recirculate. So again, yeah, oil change. That is your best advice. Don't rail on the motor, be nice to it. SoCal, I am definitely giving you a wrench mod because you've been really helpful in the chat. So look for that. I want to get you guys. I want to get my chat guys on here every Sunday when I go live at 1. That way you guys can help moderate my chat. So you've been doing really good, man. I'm going to be doing that for you. Butch the Cat. I'm getting a 95 on my thermostat and the oil change. What do I change? Do I change the filter as well? Anytime you're changing oil, change the filter. Every time. Don't ever change oil and not change the filter. That is the best advice I can give anyone when it comes to doing your own oil changes. If you change your oil, change your filter every single time. The reason that this needs to be done, and this is a good way to check for shady shop work. If you know you have a dirty oil filter on your vehicle and you can see it, it doesn't, like there's a lot of dust and dirt and stuff on it and a little bit of grease or whatever on that filter. If you get your vehicle back from an oil change and you check that filter and it's still dirty, that means they just dropped your oil and filled it back up. Shady shop, never go to them, and don't be afraid to call them out. Also, don't be afraid to run them up on their socials too about it. Don't let that slide. Those are the kind of shops that we need to call out for bad practices because they're cutting corners. They want to save themselves $7 to $10 and not put a filter on it. In turn, that could destroy a $3,000 to $10,000 engine. So it's not worth it. I build performance rather than daily drivers. That's why I do 200 miles. Yes, okay, SoCal. That explains a lot because when you were saying every couple hundred miles, I was questioning why every couple hundred? There has to be a reason. Yes, you're pushing your motors a lot harder when you build performance engines. So yes, you do need to change that oil a lot more. It can't just be a simple, well, I put a few thousand miles on, I can swap it now. No, you're pushing that vehicle to its limit. So yeah, you're doing it a lot more. On a daily driver, if he's dealing with a daily driver, absolutely. About every 1,000 to 1,500 during the break-in period, Once he gets past the break-in period, then he wants to vary his RPMs. Don't over rev, don't push the engine, just kind of let his RPMs go up and vary. Also, don't run your cruise control. Best advice I can give you. SoCal, your filter holds a lot of contaminated trash that could go get back up in the engine. Yes, that's why we change filters every single time we drop that oil. It doesn't matter. It has to get changed. Butch, thanks for all the tips. Solid answers, Bad Wrench, Auto, and SoCal. Yeah, like I said, we do this every Sunday at 1 p.m. I always do a project before I get into the news stuff, and then usually I'll wrap it up after the news. There's been a lot of chats today, guys, so this has been awesome. I've been having a chance to engage with you. This is really what I like to do, is do some of these, start off with my project, let you guys flow in, get done with my project, and then, help answer your questions. John, what kind of oil filter do you recommend for a 2023 Acura RDX 2.0 turbo? So there's a bit of a controversy when it comes to oil filters. Oftentimes the best is to look at whatever the manufacturer is running and try to stick with that. So I can give you an example of a GM vehicle. A GM, if you wanted to stick to GM, you could go with the AC Delco or Delphi filters. Those would be as close to OEM that you could possibly get. Now, some people will go directly to the dealer and pay the additional dealership markup for a filter. Also, we're going to have some videos coming up next week on something that happened that I bought online. This is going to get into why I will tell you guys not to buy online filters. Go buy them at a decent auto parts store, and always open the box and check the parts before you take them home. Best advice. That is the quickest way to eliminate problems, is to check your parts before you leave the auto parts store. There's been too many times I've either had the wrong part in box or I've had a damaged part in box. And when I opened it up in the store, I saw it and said, hey, what the heck? Give me good parts. So yeah, always open box in store. Make sure that the part is good. Put hands on part. That has to happen if you're going to work on your own cars. SoCal, always use the oil recommended by the manufacturer. Yes, SoCal, you are absolutely right. Always go with manufacturer recommendation. That means weight. So if it's a 520, make sure you run 520 oil. Now you can run synthetic. I tend to lean away from conventional oil nowadays because conventional oil does break down. And I don't like dealing with the breakdown of that oil, and it could potentially cause more problems later on. So I usually will stick to the synthetics because they don't break down. But synthetic does have a horrible trait. And that horrible trait is it does catch carbon. So as the engine kind of carbons up, it will catch that and contaminate the oil, meaning that carbon will float around, and that can be very small carbon particles that does get by your filter. So that's why we change our oil. On a synthetic, I will run it maximum 5,000 miles before I do an oil change. I usually try to stick to about a 4,000 mile oil change on a full synthetic. On a conventional, I would never go past 3,000, ever on a conventional oil setup. I also try to run higher grade filters. So I have used Fram oil filters in the past, but I don't buy the super cheap Fram. I always go to the top of the line Fram. I have ran Napa filters as well. Again, I don't do the silver line, I do the gold. And if you really break down why you would want to go to that higher and more expensive filter, it's because of the microns that it filters down to. When your cheaper filters are produced, they're produced cheaply, which meaning they won't have as many pleats in it. Those pleats are what catches the contamination. When you don't have enough pleats in it, it'll get by the filter really quickly, or could possibly tear the filter rather than getting stuck in that filter material. Usually your higher grade filters have more pleats. That's why they're more expensive. It isn't the color of the paint. It isn't any of that. If you cut them open, you'll count the pleats that the oil has to flow through in order for it to be sucked back up into the engine. That's why you're paying for the additional price is because of the additional pleats that filters out the contaminants. And I always go with the highest line that I can possibly get my hands on. It's worked well for me, and very rarely have I had engine issues because of it. Usually, if I have engine issues, it's because I was probably kicking the snot out of it and probably broke the engine, to be honest with you. SoCal, always make sure the O-ring is in the box and the filter. Yes, that is one big thing that a lot of people don't necessarily replace, is they don't replace that O-ring, especially if you have one of those plastic cap style screw-ins like this one does. This one, if you take and unscrew that plastic cap where the filter is, there's a O-ring that needs to be replaced. Now, if you have the metal cartridge style filters, there's going to be an O-ring inside that. Make sure that that O-ring is on the old filter. Otherwise, it got stuck up on the engine. You'll need to peel that out before you put your new filter on. Don't run two O-rings up in there. What will happen is that oil will press out between the O-rings and it'll leak the oil out. You don't want to lose engine oil. That's the worst thing that can happen. Make sure that you keep enough oil in it so that it doesn't ever run dry. Running dry one time can destroy a lot of components within an engine and do a ton of damage. It doesn't take a loss of even a lot of oil for it to start having a whole lot of issues. And if you're having a lot of oil consumption, that is another issue we could cover in another topic for another week. Let's go ahead and transition now into the news. Guys, I haven't done much news this week because I'm working on a lot of stuff behind the scenes. So we've been working on trying to get onto more socials, trying to get out and do more as far as the channel and try to branch out and do other stuff. So when I'm finished here, I will be going to the Mean Green website, probably at about the 2:30 or 3 o'clock time. I'm going to go ahead and go live over there, and then we're going to go ahead and finish this project. So what you guys saw was me taking the pipe down here, cleaning that flange. That's the main part. In that one, I'm going to finish cleaning the flanges, and I'm going to start bolting everything back into place and run the bolts tight. This is a really simple repair. Anytime you're doing like a flex pipe or anything like this, the worst thing you have to deal with is rusted bolts. If the rusted bolts are a problem, that's where you're going to have issues. But to wrap up the news section, guys, there has been some stuff going on in the news. I've been talking about it a little bit here, especially with Ford having that massive recall. Here's some of the things we're going to start seeing out of Ford Camp that we need to worry about. Number one, they did take money from the federal government. Everyone's trying to hide that and said that they didn't. They did take it for the battery plants. They then decided we're not going to make one of those battery plants, and we're going to decide to make it an F250, 350 Super Duty plant. When they did that, they basically spit in the federal government's face, and there's going to be negative repercussions of this. So we're going to start seeing a whole lot more issues in the Ford camp. They're going to start doing things that cater to the government, such as their newer vehicles are going to start narking on other vehicles and their own vehicle to the police department. That's a pattern that is being played out right now. It's a really dangerous thing. If it does go through, it's really going to cause a whole lot of problems. And the only way we're going to be able to combat that and fight against it is we're going to have to fight it out in court. When you get those tickets, you got to go in there, and if they don't have a clear picture of you driving, you got to fight it and say, that wasn't me driving, I borrowed it to somebody else. And that's how we got rid of some of the traffic cam tickets that we used to have back in the day. When it first came out, traffic cam tickets were very popular in major cities, and it happened a lot. What happened is everyone went back into court and fought it and went, well, do you have a picture of me driving that car? Because if you didn't, then it wasn't me driving. So that process made it to where that they couldn't reliably use those anymore. And that's what is going to need to have happen, is it's going to have to be that kind of thing. It has to be fought on a legal stage. And once the patent is approved and they start putting it into play, now they haven't put it into play yet. So I'm just informing you guys it's not there yet, but this is a patent in the works. So as soon as it happens, I will let you guys know. SoCal, first time catching the channel. Enjoy the content so far. SoCal, thank you so much. You've been a great help to the channel. Please go ahead and hit the subscribe button, and I do plan on wrenching you up. You did a great job today helping everyone out with questions. There's going to be times I'm going to be locked into a project and I may not be able to answer a question right away. So having my my wrench mods here to be able to handle stuff is an awesome thing that I'm looking forward to. Traffic cams here in San Diego, we're getting people turned right into intersections. Wow. Yeah, so that's why I said a lot of these traffic cams, they had to fight a lot of it. Arizona had one up off of the main turnpike. And that one, what happened was, I believe it was up off of the 101. There was a camera there that if you were driving too fast on the 101, you would take a picture of the plate. Well, they couldn't get clear pictures of the drivers all the time. So people kept going into court and fighting the ticket. So they were getting tied up with fighting traffic tickets, and they couldn't actually process any other crimes. So what happened was they decided, we're going to stop this practice because people are just fighting the tickets too much, and they're bogging down our legal system to where we can't actually handle processing real crimes. So that's the process that's going to happen. I mean, that's just the truth of it. So yeah, SoCal, you did an awesome job today. I'm going to wrench you up again. That'll be this week sometime, and it's been awesome to have you here. Please make sure you hit that subscribe button. I'd love to have you on every Sunday, kind of going through the chats and helping people out. Bill, yeah, there's one of my wrench mods. They took the cameras out of Tucson. I didn't know that they had one over in Tucson. I knew they had one in West Phoenix up off of the 101. So, yeah. So yeah, a lot of the traffic camera stuff had to go away because it just became too much of a legal battle back and forth, and it got to be a really big headache, huge problem. The courts just got tied up. So, as far as other news, guys, GM has decided that they're going to sell your information, and Texas filed a lawsuit. That's right. So Texas is stepping up to the plate, suing the snot out of GM for what they did. They decided to take all of the traffic data that they had off of vehicles that they had stored and decided, we're going to sell that to insurance companies. Insurance companies built their insurance rates throughout the entire country based on that information. And Texas is saying, okay, you did this without the vehicle owner's permission, meaning you have violated privacy laws. So they sued. Hopefully that lawsuit goes somewhere and GM does get their hands slapped on that one. I'll tell you guys, I do have 2 GM vehicles. It doesn't mean that I'm brand loyal. I am by no means brand loyal at all. I have a Toyota, I have a Kia, I've had so many other different vehicles. I've had Fords, Chevy, Dodge, the whole yards. You guys, one of my more popular videos on this channel is me programming key fobs on a Dodge Ram that I had. The reason I sold the Dodge Ram is I still owed on that truck. And I was able to get out from underneath it and pocket $1,000. And I said, you know what? I think I've kind of ran my course with content with this truck. I'll go ahead and shift and do something else. It was good that I did that because I'd already gotten my hands on the Toyota Tacoma. And there was a lot that I wanted to do to that. And I didn't want that other truck to kind of slow down the process of what I was doing with that. Sir Otto, how did you fit underneath it? If you're talking about how I fit underneath the car to pull that pipe out, right there, I jacked it up, ran it up on ramps, jacked up the back, and put a jack stand underneath it. And I tipped it to one side to make it easier. And if you're calling me fat, well, yeah, I'm working on that. Actually cutting down carbs quite a bit in order to drop some weight, so. Next, SoCal, have you heard about the GM vehicle being disabled when payments are due? I have heard a little bit in the news, and I didn't want to comment on it because I don't have solid facts. GM has been doing this garbage for a long time. If you got close to missing your payment or you were slightly past your due date, they would use your OnStar system to shut off the vehicle. This is something that has been going on for quite a while, and I do know people that have had it happen to them. The only issue that I'm starting to see is that these systems have gotten really heavy, and I've talked about maybe how to disable that feature that they can shut your vehicle off, but there is some negative ramifications to satellite radio or other things that require a satellite signal. So you can disable that, but there's a lot of stuff you've got to go through, especially on newer vehicles. Bill, they have what they call a blue light underneath the turn signal, and a cop nearby can give you a ticket. Wow. So yeah, not only do they have that signal deal where if they're running with their lights on, they can zip through the intersection. Yeah, I've seen this blue light camera that you're talking about, and some of those blue light cameras are just intersection cameras. In some states, other states, they will use them for ticketing purposes. It all depends on the state you live in. It really does vary whether or not they will tolerate fighting the traffic tickets or if they decided the hassle's not worth it. And I know a lot of parts in Arizona, they said it wasn't worth the hassle, so they stopped doing the whole huge traffic camera setup because it cost them a lot of money to put it out there, and then they weren't making their money back because people just kept fighting the tickets. Dark Star, as a European, what car brand is better, Ford, Dodge, or Chevy? He's coming in here firing some shots, man. Honestly, it depends on what you're more comfortable with working on. Me personally, I grew up around Chevys most of my life. I've had a few Fords, and I've had a few Dodges. Each one kind of has its own good point and bad point. I'll bring up some of the good points, I'll bring up some of the bad points, and then I'll just pinpoint to what I just feel comfortable working on at times. So one of the good points with Dodge is usually Dodges have pretty solid, heavier setups. They're not as weak. The problem is that their bodies rust really easy. As much as they put on their suspensions and frames and try to do the best they can, they still have kind of weak metal, unfortunately. They do feel a little bit more solid. They are a little heavier. They don't feel very nimble when it comes to a truck. They're like driving the old-fashioned lumber wagons, if you understand that terminology. Engine-wise, they do have some engine issues. Their transmissions are notorious for being piles of junk. So that aspect, people lean towards Dodge because of the styling of it, but now with them going EV, I think they're going to be in a world of hurt in the future. I would probably never own a newer Dodge at this point. Fords, they went to that aluminum body there for a while. I was not a fan of aluminum body at all. It wouldn't take very much to get a small little ding or dent in it, and yeah, it lightened up the truck, but wasn't really worth it. A lot of times the boxes were extremely weak to where if you pushed a toolbox off, you could poke a hole in the box. So not a very good design in my mind if you're going to use a truck as a truck. They do have a little bit of motor issues as they get older. Their transmissions are somewhat stable. They don't have horrible transmissions unless you're talking about the GM Ford partnership transmission that they did on the 10-speed. That was an absolute trash dumpster fire of a transmission. But that's been kind of the only ones I've seen. The other thing is Fords do have a rust issue. As they get older, they start rusting. And when they rust, I noticed their rust is still drivable. So that is one positive for them. Their rust is still drivable. Ford did a good job with that. Dodge, not so much. And Chevy definitely did not do good on the rust side. When they rust, they usually catastrophically fail. Frames break, chews up cabs. I mean, the rust is horrible on the GM side of things. As far as GM, a lot of their motors are pretty darn stout. Older transmissions are pretty good too. You don't have a whole lot. 700 R4 back in the day was trash. A good rebuild kit fixed a lot of the problems that they had. A lot of GM problems are first year, second year problems. So I would stay away from first year, second year GMs. If it's a redesigned body style and they're coming out with a whole bunch of new parts, lean away from that. Either go up a year or go back a year, but don't buy that first year release. Sir Otto, nice. Did not. Thank you, sir. I was just kind of poking it out there. That's all right. So Cal, had a friend with a Trailblazer that would be shut off the day the payment. Yeah, so that is a nightmare with OnStar doing that and shutting off for payments. Ford's, they're setting it up so that it automatically recalls the vehicle back to the lender. I really hope that doesn't start becoming a norm, because it wouldn't take very much for them to flip a switch and just take your vehicle away from you, even if you have been making payments. And my question is who controls those systems? Those are the hard questions that we need to ask. Who has access to them? Could you wake up one morning and not have a vehicle because of a hack? And guys, we had a bunch of issues going on recently with hacks. We really have. SoCal, Ford, Dodge, and Chevy, they're all good. Each has their own issues and positives. Yes, that is the safer answer. Oh, Fords leak more oil than others. Yeah, I've kind of noticed that. Fords do leak a ton of oil. Chevys burn it. They burn oil pretty bad. Dodge isn't so bad with that, but Dodge has some massive other issues. Just issues with basic things that you wouldn't think are a problem. Rust is a horrible nightmare on Dodge. It cripples a Dodge. Dark Star, saw the Dodge in my country once. It was it was so big. Hood went over my head. Are you guys in the U.S. bigger or what? It's like a house on wheels. Yeah. So okay. Again, you said you were from Europe, so I'm going to try to put this in a parameter that you can understand. So in the US, we have large land areas. We have big open spaces. We also have a lot of lakes, a lot of racetracks, and stuff like this. So people haul stuff. We do a lot of stuff that we need trucks to be able to haul and tow things. So our trucks have gotten bigger throughout the year to be able to do those things that we're doing with our homes. And in the US, we do a lot more home repairs than what you guys probably have access to in Europe. You guys live in a smaller area, tighter land mass. You guys don't have as far to travel. From Europeans that I've talked to, when I tell them I have an hour commute, they're like, that's a long ways. And I'm like, an hour is nothing. I mean, it really isn't. When we look at the grand scheme of things, in order to get a decent job in the US, you do have to drive a ways to get to that job and then from that job back home. And yeah, we do a lot of driving here in the US. Our stuff is a little bit bigger because we really push our vehicles to be able to do things. When we want to do a home repair project, we'll load our trucks up and bring the stuff back to our house to work on it. Oftentimes we'll haul full sheets of sheetrock or stuff like that. And you guys might not see a lot of that so much where you guys are from. It's more of space-wise. Our roads are also a lot bigger. We don't have tight, narrow roads. We have a lot wider roads. Let's get caught up here. Dodge is a bigger truck. A lift kit, they are massive. Yes. So lifted Dodges are massive. They really are. They are one of the bigger trucks. That's some of the reason why they don't always have the best fuel mileage. Dark Star, within an hour drive, I can go to another country. LOL. Yeah. So honestly, an hour here in the U.S., that doesn't even get you out of a particular state, unless you're in like maybe Rhode Island. Maybe. I mean, Rhode Island's pretty small. Yeah, maybe Rhode Island or Connecticut, one of those really tiny ones. But for the most part, yeah. And an hour is nothing. From where I live, in order to go to the border of the state I live in, I have to drive at least 2.5 hours one way just to reach the border. So that kind of gives you an idea on how big, for the most part, our country is. And if you want to drive through Texas, I'm trying to remember exactly how long it took for me to drive across Texas. I want to say it was either 10 or 13 hours. It all depended on how fast I was driving. I can't quite remember. It was a very long time ago. But yes, it takes a lot of time to get across certain areas in the U.S. We do a lot of off-road driving here, so trucks need to handle extreme conditions. Yes, that's the other thing is we live in tough climates. For the most part, anywhere from the middle of the U.S. up deals with a lot of snow every year. So that snow, that ice, that all of that stuff that we got to get through is basically like people going mudding constantly. Our winter times, especially in the upper north, it's like mudding every time it snows because it's so massive and it takes so long to clean it out that there's times you might have to bust a 2-foot snowdrift just to be able to get to the store. I mean, that's what it's like. It takes 14 hours to drive the length of California alone. Yeah. So yeah, that's what it is. It's, to go from one border to the other. You're talking from southern to top, yeah, 14 hours. If you were talking the other way, I don't think that's 14 hours. I want to say that's like 6, almost 7, I think. Yeah, something like that. It depends on where you're at too in California. It's shaped weird. So if just drive straight through, you still got quite a few hours of driving to get that through there. Dark Star, Now here's the thing. This is a very bizarre. You guys have longer road distances, and yet you guys drive 4 6-liter trucks. I have a 1.4 liter propane. Okay. So yeah, this gets into what I was trying to bring up with you is the towing aspect. Towing, the reason that this happens, that we have bigger trucks, is we usually tow trailers. So if we had a 1.4 liter and we were trying to tow a big trailer, it would actually cause that vehicle to slow down and bog down. We wouldn't be able to pull the trailers that we pull. A lot of people do racing. A lot of people do off-roading. Those are big trailers that they're pulling around and they need a big truck. So we'll see, 6-liter trucks. We'll see 4-liter trucks. We'll see those bigger engines. This one here, this is a Toyota Tacoma 04. This might be similar size of truck that you would have, but this has a 3.4 6-liter in it. Those are the smaller size of truck with a bigger engine. And as you step up to the full sizes, the engines get even bigger because we're towing with them constantly. A lot of our diesel trucks are small grade commercial trucks. So what you guys see as a commercial truck, we would see it as a potential pickup truck. Our semi trucks are even bigger still. And even you compare our semis to the rest of the world, and it's a massive difference. And the reason I can speak on the trucking side of things, I've spent a lot of time in the trucking industry. So I can tell you quite a bit about it, but that's not really what this channel is about. I try to lean away from the trucking side of stuff because I do like having a break from my job. I don't want to bring that into this thing. So, Cal, the big motor in the trucks is because of how we use the truck. Towing, hauling, extra torque. Yes, that's exactly it. Dark Star, a 3.4 liter car is a luxury tax over here. We call 2.5 liters, 2.5 liter cars big here. I'm in a land of freedom and power. I can't stand my 1.4. Okay, yeah, so you're dealing with lack of horsepower and maybe some mobility issues, and unfortunately we're seeing a lot more smaller engines. I mean, come on guys, this is a mid-size car. I mean, it's a mid-size car with a 2.4 liter. And don't get me wrong, it gets up and goes, it moves. But you put the equivalent 3.6 liter in it, V6, this car is like a bullet now. I mean, it's dramatically different. And that's the difference that we see. there is an associated cost with us having the cars we have in the US. Our insurance rates suck. I mean, our insurance rates are through the roof. And it's all based on other drivers, which is why GM selling those information to the insurance companies was a huge problem, and why I really was upset with GM on that. Dark Star, I have American freedom issues. Well, we all love horsepower. I mean, if you guys are here, you guys are here because you like working on cars, you like horsepower, you like, you know, working on your stuff and making sure that it runs good. And that's really what we're trying to do here, is help you extend the life of what's left. Because when some of these things start to fade away at a certain point, we're going to have a hard time even finding good vehicles to drive. And the more EVs creep in, the more people push these hybrid technologies. These are all going to become very expensive things to fix and replace. And oftentimes we're not going to be able to repair them, which is going to make the vehicles disposable. Unfortunately, disposable vehicles add to the issue of landfills and all the other things that we have going on, because there's a lot of plastics and stuff that don't get recycled in a car. When they get crushed, they get ran through a shredder, shreds up the car. You have glass, you have all this other stuff that isn't metal that will get pulled out. That stuff will just get sent to a landfill. It doesn't get recycled beyond that. They will pull out precious metals, but that's it. And I can speak from that because I drove semi-truck in the recycling industry. I know what the processes are. I know how they work. And I also know that you cannot recycle EV batteries. As much as people have been telling you you can, you can't. There are certain aspects of them that become radioactive. They can break down the components, but then they have to be stored in a nuclear waste facility because they do become radioactive just going through the cycle charges. Now, it's not gamma radiation like a spent fuel rod in a nuclear power plant, but it is radiation. So, Dark Star, my buddy has an H2, burned a 6.8 liter engine because of no oil. Yes, always keep your oil up, guys. Is GM common for GM engines? Having no oil in it, this is from SoCal, having no oil in it will destroy any engine, no matter the brand. Exactly. They do have oil leaking issues. So yes, they do leak oil. GM oil pans are notorious for having oil leaks. That's one area that they're pretty common that they have massive leaks on, is their oil pans and rear main seals are notorious for leaking. You can seal it up tight, you can silicone everything super tight, and you still wind up with a small seep. They do leak oil out of the oil pans. There isn't much you can do about it. A lot of the newer engines actually run oil pressure through the pan into the block. I hated this design, and I called out GM for it because those gaskets are in a really bad place. And as that oil is being forced through, it does spit out right where the oil filter is. So you could think you have an oil filter issue when you actually have an oil pan seal issue. Jake, I bought a truck so I can take it everywhere I need to go for work. Yes, if you're on the pipeline, a lot of you guys run your trucks hard. You put them in spots that most people are torturing them constantly. So yes, that's a fact, 100% fact. That's why our trucks are so big. We use them pretty much as industrial work trucks. That's what they're used for. It was a $7,000 bill to swap out the engine in a gearbox. Did he get a fair deal? $7,000. I'm gonna ask, was it a used engine or new engine? Because a used engine, he might have been a little high priced, but if it was a lower mile engine that he put in, plus to do the gearbox with it, I can tell you right now, as far as US prices, that doesn't sound extremely bad. That doesn't sound like it's out of line at all. That actually sounds like he got a pretty decent deal. And if it's brand new parts, he got a smoking good deal. Smoking good deal. $7,000 for engine swap here is extremely good deal. Yeah, it is. I can tell you right now, if we don't do the timing chain in this, usually around 150, 160, if you don't do the timing chain will break, the engine will blow up, and this engine is $2,000 just for the engine. That's not the labor to put it in. So yeah, yep. Used engine imported from the U.S., low miles. I'm gonna say he still got a pretty solid deal because it was low miles. As long as you could verify that it was low miles, he got an extremely good deal. Yeah, very good deal. So definitely. All right, guys, I'm going to go ahead and wrap this video up here, guys. Thank you for this live. This has been awesome to chat with you guys, discuss topics, and we got to do a project. If you guys want, go check me out over on the Mean Green site here in a little bit. I'm going to be finishing up the install in this, and then I'm going to do something similar over there, just kind of seeing how the chats go over there. I do appreciate you guys so much. Make sure you guys hit the like, the follow buttons, ring the notification bell so you know when I go live. SoCal, make sure you hit up the subscribe, because I need to find you later to give you your wrench. So this will be awesome. Thank you guys so much. And as always, I'll see you guys on the next one.